From AccuWeather.com, this is AccuWeather Daily, a brief host-read article. It's weather news in a nutshell. There is a crucial network of Atlantic Ocean currents, but according to several new studies, it is possible that these Atlantic Ocean currents could collapse, which would plunge parts of the world into a deep freeze. Temperatures in some major cities would be -50 in the winter. Researchers are warning that it would bring profound climate and societal impacts. The system of currents is called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, better known and easier said as the AMOC. Think of it as a system of currents that works like a giant conveyor belt, pulling warm water from the southern hemisphere and tropics to the northern hemisphere, where it cools, sinks, and then flows back south. Well, these new studies say that the AMOC is weakening. With global warming disrupting the balance of heat and salinity that keeps it moving, there is a concern that it could collapse this century. In that event, there would be huge global weather and climate shifts, including plunging temperatures in Europe, which relies on the AMOC for its mild climate. Now, the question is, how will these impacts unfold in a world heated up by humans burning fossil fuels? René van Westen, a marine and atmospheric researcher in the Netherlands and a co-author of the paper, said this new study is the first to use a modern, complex climate model to answer that question. The researchers looked at a scenario where the AMOC weakens by 80% and the Earth is around 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the period before humans began burning large amounts of fossil fuels. Now, the planet is currently at 1.2 degrees of warming. They focused on what would happen as the climate stabilized post-collapse, multiple decades into the future. Now, even in this hotter world, they found substantial cooling over Europe with sharp drops in average winter temperatures and more intense cold extremes, a very different picture than the United States, where the study found temperatures would continue to increase even with an AMOC collapse. Sea ice would spread southward as far as Scandinavia, parts of the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands. This would have a huge impact on cold extremes as the white surface of the ice reflects the sun's energy back into space, amplifying cooling. Now, the scientists have created an interactive map to visualize the impacts of an AMOC collapse across the globe. London, for example, could see winter cold extremes of -2.2 degrees Fahrenheit, while Oslo could see temperatures as low as -55 and endure maximum temperatures below 32 for close to half of the year. Storms would increase in parts of Europe, and the increased temperature difference between northern and southern Europe will strengthen the jet stream, increasing storm intensity over northwestern Europe. While cooling on an ever hotter planet may sound like good news, Van Westen warns it's anything but. Society in many parts of the northern hemisphere is not built for these kinds of cold extremes, he says. Crops would die, threatening food security, and infrastructure could buckle. What's more, the impacts of an AMOC collapse would mostly be felt in Europe's winter. It would still endure increasingly deadly heat waves in the summer as the climate crisis intensified. The southern hemisphere, meanwhile, is projected to experience increased warming. The scientists also looked at the impacts of an AMOC collapse in an even hotter world. If global temperatures reach around 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, the heat outweighs the cooling impact of an AMOC collapse in Europe. But he added an AMOC collapse would not only affect temperatures. Other impacts include increased sea level rise, which will particularly affect the U.S., where a weaker AMOC is already driving significantly increased flooding on the northeastern coast. Another scientist said the research uses only one climate model. Others will rely on different models and will likely come up with a variety of scenarios. Now, what ultimately happens will depend on how the two opposing trends play out: AMOC-induced cooling and climate change-induced heating. And there's a large uncertainty that does remain. The study is by no means the last word, especially as huge questions do remain over whether the AMOC could be on course to collapse. Richard Allen, a climate science professor at the University of Reading, who was not involved in this research, said, Even the mere possibility of this dire storyline unfolding over coming centuries underscores the need to forensically monitor what is happening in our oceans. Van Westen said, "What is crystal clear is that an AMOC collapse would be very bad for society, and we want to avoid it at all costs." That's all for now. You can find more regional forecasts and science-based articles at AccuWeather.com. And for your local forecast at your fingertips, download the AccuWeather app. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe. I'll be back tomorrow with more from AccuWeather.